Hi and welcome to part 3 of powering up your home office slides using Power Platform. After registering the app in the Hue developer portal and preparing the key vault for storing the client ID and client secret, we can now go into the process of getting the access token, the bearer token, which will contain the access token and the refresh token. We will also build a process that can provide that access token to any calling services and also renew the access token with the refresh token whenever needed. So let's look into the the logic app that set it all up. So when we receive the redirect from the Hue developer portal, it comes in as a GET request. So I have changed the method to GET here, and this is the URL that we provided when registering the app as the callback URL. So we will get the request in here, and I will first of all get the authorization code and by getting the trigger outputs. So whenever this logic app is triggered, any query parameters appended to that callback URL will be picked up by this custom expression. And next, I will use the key vault, the Azure Key Vault API, to getting the secrets. So I need to have an URI where I specify the name of the secret I want to get, and authenticating with the logic app's managed identity. Likewise for getting the client secret. After that, I can start the process of sending a post request to the token endpoint of the remote API at Hue. And for this, I can do either basic authentication or digest authentication. Preferably, it will be best to do digest, especially if you create an app that may run on, for example, mobiles or systems you don't have complete control over. But I do have complete control over this environment running in the logic app, so I will use basic authentication. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. You can manually do a base64 conversion using the base64 function in logic app, and then concatenate the strings containing the client ID and the client secret with a colon between them. This will provide me with a base64 encoded string. I can also, let's see here, I can also use the authentication type basic directly with the HTTP request. So here I have specified the API for Meet You and the token endpoint, and I provide the authorization code, which I got in the request trigger, and I'm using basic and the username is the client ID I retrieved from the key vault, and the password is the client secret I retrieved from the key vault. Another way to do it would be to use that manually calculated value here and just add authorization for header, and then typing basic and using that base64 code like this. So that would be an alternative, but then I would need to specify none here, or raw, sorry. So but for now we will use basic authentication. That should in reality provide me back with a response where I get the access token. So the next part will be to look at that access token and see when it expires. By default, as per now, the Hue API returns a bearer token with an access token that is valid for 7 days, and the refresh token is valid for 112 days. So it makes sense to not just renew that access token every time we call the logic app, for example. It's better to only renew when we need it using the refresh token. So I have added some custom expressions here. This is all good explanations and details for in the blog post. But I'm adding the number of seconds to the time now and to the number of seconds that the access token is valid, which I get from that request. And next, I need to convert that value to an integer. And there are two types of integers used for specifying time values in the Azure REST API. You have something called epoch, which is a 32-bit Unix style integer. All dates start with 0, which is the 1st of January 1970. And being 32-bit, the maximum date for that will be 2038 or something. So we also have something called ticks, and ticks is 64 bits. So there we can provide a much larger scale, and we have to do some custom calculations here to get the value in the correct format. So first I get the timestamp for the access token expires in ticks, which will give me a 64-bit integer. And then I similarly get the 1970, 0101 and 00 time in ticks as well. And then I will do a calculation where I subtract the time today in ticks, and then the access token expire time in ticks, and I subtract the 1970 value in ticks, and I divide that by 1 million, which will give me the integer for epoch, which is the 32-bit integer value. And that is really the value for setting the expiry date, which I will do at the key vault level. So the thinking is that when I set an expiry date for key vault, the key vault secret, I can test against that later. So if the secret is valid, it should mean that the access token is still valid. But if the secret is expired, then I will have some logic that will make it possible to renew that access token, for example, and still using the managed identity. And all in all, this will provide a response back if everything's successful, so I can measure that from any calling services. So this is the logic app, and if I look into some of the choices I've made here, this is the overall steps. So let's see. Since the key vault is and the access token is considered credentials and sensitive information, I have also done a protection of all the operations that returns the secrets. So I have selected secure outputs for every operation that queries the key vault, and also for the action that gets the access token, and also when I set the key vault secret back, update the secret back to store the bearer token in my key vault. This means that anyone that has access to my Azure subscription, they cannot go into the run history for the logic app and see my private credentials, for example. So let's see how this looks in running. So if I go back here, let's see, one more step, and then I have prepared my request to the API meet you, where I provide my client ID and some information on my application registration, and then I press enter, and you can see I will be prompted to trust application. And when I do that, I will be redirected to the logic app, and it should return a success. if everything's okay. And if I go back to the run history for that logic app, I can now see that it has succeeded, and I can go into the details. So I can get, for example, the authorization code from the request string. I got the key vault secret, but as I configured, the contents is not shown openly because it's a credential information, and I secure the output. So, and you can also see the calculations for the access token, the timestamp values. Here is an example in ticks, which is a 64-bit string integer, sorry, and likewise for the 1970 value. And then we can do calculate the expiry time in epoch, which is 32-bit. And I'm using that to setting the secrets back. And looking at my key vault, I can now see that the secret for the bearer token has been updated, and an expiration date is 7 days from now. So with that, we have now built a logic app that will get the authorization code and request the token from the token endpoint at Meet Hue. And with the access token, we can now start querying our light resources soon. But first, in the next post, we will look into how to manage the access token and renew it if possible, if needed. So thanks for now, and see you soon.